everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we're going to get a start on putting the engine for our 1948 Ford 8N back together. As you can see, we've got the engine block painted, and I've got the deck and the manifold surfaces cleaned off. So now we're going to go ahead and start working the bores. Now, 1, 2, and 3, the same piston and the same rings are going right back in them because there was nothing wrong with them. They were working just fine. So what we're going to do on those ones, we're just going to work them a little bit with this Christmas tree hone, or a flex hone, I guess you can call it. Number 4, it's getting re-ringed, and I do have on the back here a tiny bit of pitting that I want to try and work a little bit. So we're going to go in there with an actual cylinder hone and see if we can clean it up some. So when we do this, we're not really trying to remove any metal. We're just basically cleaning it. Because I power washed this and whatnot, there could be a little rust in there. And we want to just get rid of that and kind of break any glaze. Just to give the rings a chance to carry on where they left off. Now we're going to start with the cylinder hone. You use this to adjust it out very, very slowly. And to start, we're just going to, you have to set it out loose because the cylinder will have somewhat of a taper in it. And if you set it up so it's tight at the top, when you shove it down the bottom, it gets into the taper and it'll jam. So we're just going to slowly start working this thing and see what we get. While we're getting on it, you can see that kind of the oil is turning black. That's actually metal that's being removed. So it's doing something. It's hard on the drill though. That thing is starting to get warm. It's just a little 3/8 drill. So I'm going to go in the house. I've got a 1/2 inch drill in there. That'll do better. It's looking a little better. I mean, we'll never get the pits completely out of it, but we can get it a lot better. It's starting to disappear a bit now. Switching to that larger drill definitely made a big difference. Now we can start putting some stuff together. But before we do, we have to take a few steps. First thing, these are our crankshaft seals. These are the front ones, and these are the rear ones. And we want to soak them in oil for a little bit. So this is our little tub of oil that we use when we assemble engines and stuff. We'll just throw them in there and let them soak. Then we also have to install the front and rear oil gallery plugs and the rear main seal retainer. We'll start with these things. Put a little sealant around there, and then this just drops in like that. And then we'll tap it down with a piece of brass to get it seated. Another thing we can do while our oil seals soak is we can get the camshaft ready to go. So we've put the gear on here, and the gear, because it's got, well, there's the mark there. It'll only go on one way because it doesn't have a keyway. This is aligned by one odd bolt. So you can see here, if you turn it, you see it doesn't line up. So this here is the only way it will go. So then we put in our lock plate. It goes like that. Then we can install our bolts. I'll tighten them to 25 foot-pounds, and then we'll fold up the locks. The camshaft of these engines has no cam bearings. It just runs right on the block. That's why it's very important on these things to keep them serviced up, keep the oil clean, keep the oil changed. As well as on the front, there's no thrust bearing. The thrust surface is a machine surface on the block. As well as the other side, it's just the inside of the timing cover. So your oil is very important in these. So we'll just oil this up. We'll put motor oil on all these surfaces. We don't really need break-in lube on the lobes or anything because everything's going back exactly where it was. And the parts are already mated to each other. There we are. Then we'll just have to make sure when we drop the crankshaft in that the right tooth of the timing gear aligns there. No worries at all. Okay, those things have been soaking long enough, so we're going to go ahead and install it. It drops in like that. And as tempting as it is to cut off what's sticking out, don't cut it off. Now we'll put some oil on these and we'll get our crankshaft. I decided I think I'm just going to pull the camshaft back out a hair, drop the crank in, and then worry about lining up the timing mark. We've gone and got all these oil holes cleaned out. These two rods are lubed from this one, and this rod is lubed from that one, and that one from that one. So we can drop our crankshaft in now and put the main caps on. So these will just oil up the bearing and put them in with the arrow pointing forward, or the tangs both on the same side. Either way is the right way. We went ahead and torqued the mains down to 90 foot-pounds. The spec calls for 95 to 105, but I torque them to 90 because some of them you have to advance them a little bit more to get the castle slots to line up so you can put the safety wire back in. So that's my reason for doing that, and 90 is plenty. Then what we did was we turned the crank around until we could get our timing marks lined up and push the camshaft back in. So once we've got that done, we have to make sure that we have a little backlash on the camshaft gear, which we do, and we have a little backlash on the oil pump gear, which we do. That means nothing's binding up, and I made sure that the crankshaft turns freely. It does have a little drag on it because of the rear seal. You could see it, that installing the crankshaft pulled it down a little bit more, and then when we put the other half in the oil pan and scrunch it right down, that will close things right up. Now I'll use a Johnson bar and turn some of these nuts so I can get the safety wire in. I'm not sure it's really even necessary, but it was there, so we'll put it back. It's just mechanics wire. Now we can flip it back over, and we could start putting the valve gear in. I can't put the pistons and rods in yet because I'm still waiting for a set of rod bearings to come in the mail. I did get the set of rings for cylinder number 4, but still waiting on them rod bearings. So now we're going to get these valves lashed and lapped in to make sure everything looks good. So here's a standard flathead cam follower. You'll see it's just a slug. Here is an aftermarket adjustable one. Now these things are dear. They're like 20 bucks a piece. I've only got 5 of them here. This is what came out of an old engine. I guess they were able to reuse 3 of these when they did the valve job, and they had to put 5 replace adjustables to get their lash. Anyhow, I'm going to show you what we're going to do to get these things set up and lashed. It's a little unorthodox, but it works. So we've started at the back. We've got cylinders 4 and 3 done. Now we're going to start working on number 2. The first thing we have here on number 2 is the exhaust valve. And I could see the face of it looks a little banged up. So we're going to put it on the old machine here and give it a cut. Okay, that came out nicely. My coolant pump has quit working. It would be a little more nice of a polished finish if that was working, but this is fine. So now what we'll do is we'll put our valve guide in, and before we do that, we'll just give the seat a touch with the stone to make sure it looks okay. Try to find one of these. This is the arbor for the seat cutter for a flathead. That looks good. Now we'll lap it in. So we'll put in our guide and then put some lapping compound on the face of the valve. Then we'll use this thing, a suction cup thing, and work it back and forth and see what kind of pattern we get on the face of the valve. On an overhead valve head, you can cheat. You can grab it from the other side with a cordless drill and do this. But on these old flatheads, this is how you got to do it. It's hard to see, but our pattern is in the middle of the valve face. It could be a little bit closer to the root. So what I'm going to do is stick a 60-degree cutter down there and take away a bit of that. There, now you can see the pattern is more in the center of the face of the valve. That's good. So what we're going to do now is set the lash. So to do that, first we're going to put in our cam follower. All right, and then we have to make sure that this thing is on top dead center on the compression stroke. So you just basically by turning the engine over and feeling the position of this relative to the crank position, we'll be able to establish that. Now we'll drop in our valve and see what we've got. This is an exhaust valve, so it wants 14 to 16 thousandths cold. So I just shoot for 15, right? Okay, so it turns out we've got 19. So we need to take away 4 thousandths of an inch. There's a couple of ways we could do it. Number one, we could take some more off the face of the valve. We could take some more off the seat. Or we could do something else. There's not really a lot of margin left on this valve, so cutting the valve anymore is kind of out of the question. I don't want to take anything off the seat, so I'll show you what I do. It might be hard to see, but this follower has wear on the top of it. So all I do is I just weld it. I weld a blob of weld on the end of it and clean it up on the lathe, and that gives me a little extra. And then we've got plenty to work with for setting our valve lash. There we go. Now we'll go cool it off and then mount it in the lathe. So all I do now is I get it in the lathe, and I got a grinding disc on my little right angle. Now I put the lifter back in, and after checking with my feeler gauge, we've got about 6.5 thousandths of clearance there. So we need to get this thing to 15. So we're going to put it on the machine and take off 8 thousandths, and then we'll remeasure it and see what we've got. So we'll start feeding the valve across the wheel there. And every graduation on here is 1 thousandth, so it makes it pretty easy. We'll take off 8 and remeasure. Now over to the little belt sander here, and we'll just put a little chamfer on it. So we've got a nice fit with our 15 thousandths feeler gauge now. So we're good there. Now let's see what this intake valve looks like. Well, that one worked out pretty darn good. It's 12, right bang on. I could, fiddle around with it a little bit more and try to get another thou, but I'm not going to worry about 1 thou. We'll let that one be at 12. I'll get these last 2 done, and then I'll be back. All right, that went well. The last 2 came out perfect. So now what we're going to do is I'm just going to put some oil on each one of these lifters and install it for keeps. Then we can put our valve cartridges together and get them stuck in. The first 2 valves are in for keeps, so I'll show you how to do it. That was number 1. So next we'll bring number 3 up the top dead center, which is really just taking number 1 down the bottom dead center. There we go. Both lifters are down. That means she's ready to fire, and we can put in our valves. So first we'll put in the exhaust valve. I'll show you how you build it up. It's pretty simple. We're just gonna little motor oil on the stem. Drop down our guide. Drop down the valve spring. Now you'll see you've got at one end a couple of coils that are close together. That goes against the guide. There's our retainer. And then you literally, I can't show you because I haven't got my tripod set up. But you just push this down with your thumb and your forefinger and put the locks in. All the guides have a groove here for a seal. And strangely, when you buy a rebuild kit, they give you 8 seals. But you only need to put in 4, and that's right from the factory service manual. You don't put the seals on the exhaust valves. Apparently, they will burn. The purpose of the seal is to prevent oil getting pulled past the guide into the intake stream. So anyway, we'll drop this in. Number 3. Then you just reach into the port with a big screwdriver, push the guide down like that, and put the clip on. For the intake, you can see we've installed a seal. Then the procedure is the same as the exhaust. Now they're all in, I'll start over again at number 1 and double check my lash. They all checked out front to back. That is darn good. Now we can get the gaskets and the covers and close her up. Whew, there we go. That was quite a day. Screwing around, getting that valve lash. I always remember my dad, he always tells me, and I've told you guys before, our family had an auto parts place with a machine shop in the back in the 60s, and any of these Ford flatheads, they wouldn't work on them unless the customer agreed to put a set of adjustable tappets in them. It saved them hours and hours of this screwing around trying to set the valve lash. And in the long run, the adjustable tappets are great because you could, you know, keep an eye on your valve lash and actually be able to adjust it once in a while, rather than this where it's pretty invasive to try and adjust your valve lash. Our method of closing up the valve lash was a little unorthodox. I don't think I've ever thought before about welding the top of a cam follower. But it is what it is. I just didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on this. Once this thing is back together, literally for the rest of its life, it'll probably get 20, maybe 30 hours put on it. It's just going to be a toy for putting around. So I did what I had to do. Also, I mean, the tops of those things are hardened. But I could tell, I had one in the lathe and I touched where the valve had been wearing on. It had worn through the hardening long ago and was into the soft stuff underneath. So I'm not too worried about that. That welding is somewhat hard. It's not, you know, exactly mild steel. Once it's got kind of a hardness to it. So hey, we're gonna see if it works. If it doesn't work, well, whatever. All I got to do is buy some parts and I can put everything back to, you know, a proper way or how it was. But I'm confident that it'll be okay and last quite a while for what I'm going to do with it. And remember, it's got, you know, we've got 80 years of lubricant technology from when this was made till now. And I'm actually going to maintain it somewhat. So, hey, time will tell, right? Anyway, that'll do it for this one. In the next video, hopefully my connecting rod bearings will arrive and we can put the pistons on the rods, put the rings on the number 4 piston, get all of those put in, get the bottom of it and the front of it closed up, and carry on from there. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. I know there's a lot of you end tractor enthusiasts out there. You're always messaging me. That's my encouragement to keep plugging away on some of these things. I can't thank you enough for supporting my channel and keeping my grammar is terrible, and continuing to come back and watch the new videos. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, please, down below, If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications when we add a new video, and hit the like button, leave a comment, send me a question. I love talking with all you guys. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the Claremont Classic Garage. So long for now.